to bring on our next speaker, Dr. Enrico Suardi, Director of Psychiatry at St. Elizabeth's Hospital and Director of Forensic Services at the Ross Center in Washington, D.C. He is co-chair of Conflict Management and Conflict Resolution section of the World Psychiatric Association and President-elect of the Washington Psychiatric Society. A diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, in Psychiatry, Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and Forensic Psychiatry. On the faculty at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, Georgetown University, and George Washington University. He has also served as the Chief Child and Family Psychiatrist at the U.S. State Department. Dr. Suardi studied political psychology with renowned CIA psychiatrist Gerald Post. Completed his MD and a residency in preventive medicine in Milan, Italy, and obtained an MSc in public health and public policy from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Enrico also holds an executive MA in National Security Affairs as a member of the IWP class of 2019. Enrico will be giving us a fascinating talk profiling Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So, Enrico.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Yes, I'm going to be talking about the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And if I can have the next slide. But first, as a psychiatrist, I have to tell you that I am not allowed to diagnose individuals that I have not evaluated personally and with their informed consent. So there's going to be no diagnosis here, of course. This is the Goldwater rule. It's an ethical tenet of the American Psychiatric Association. It really comes from a story from the 1960s involving Senator Barry Goldwater from Arizona. He was running for president, and he had authored a book entitled The Conscience of the Conservative in 1960, and a magazine called Fact ran a story mocking that title, and the title was The Unconscious of a Conservative. And what they did, they called thousands of psychiatrists and over thousands of, and asking if Senator Goldwater was fit to be president in their professional opinion. And over 1,000 of them responded no, and some of them made disparaging remarks using the psychiatric jargon of the time, which is mostly psychoanalytic. And so, if I can have the next slide, Senator Goldwater, of course, did not appreciate and sued the magazine. He won. And the American Psychiatric Association, which was not sued directly, decided it was time to impose a gag rule that is known as the Goldwater rule. There is an exception for psychiatrists who are involved in national security work and do that, in that context and with all the confidentiality. I am not, and I also have to say that I do agree entirely with this rule. I endorse it, and so we have a photo here of Senator Goldwater essentially shushing the psychiatrists. So if I can have the next slide. So greetings, namaskar. Prime Minister Modi was recently in the US, as you know. He was here in June for a state visit that went on for several days. One of the gifts that he received from the President and the First Lady in that picture right here was a autographed first edition copy of the collection of poems of Robert Frost. The Indian press noticed that it was a well thought out gift. Frost is a quintessential American poet, but was also one of the favorites of the Pandit Nehru, the first Prime Minister of independent India and leader of the Congress, and very intellectual person. And India has a tradition of poets, statesmen. One of them here in this picture, Baivaj, a leader of the, now deceased leader of the BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party, also a former prime minister. And then one of them is Prime Minister Modi, right here, also a poet, an author, and a statesman. Can I have the next slide? And this is a list that is not even comprehensive of books that he has authored. And two of them are poetry collections. They were both translated from his native language, Gujarati, into English in 2014 when he was running for prime minister. I would say not a coincidence, it was a way to introduce him and cast a positive light on him for the foreign audience, but mainly for the educated Indian audience that has been and remains, skeptical of his party and his politics. And I said two of these books are a collection of poetry. Can I have the next slide? So, in the introduction to this book, Modi readily admits that he's not a literate poet. He doesn't really care that much about the structure, the forms. What he knows, what he understands, and what he feels strongly is emotions. And so poetry is a way to channel his emotions. And in his poetry there is strength, as in the verses that I chose here. If I can have the next slide. But there is also vulnerability, and like in these verses here. This is a collection of poetic letters that he writes to the mother goddess, the mother goddess. This is 1980s. His work days are long and very hard, and sometimes he feels overwhelmed by the amount of work and the challenges that he has. And he puts that in poetry, these emotions. And I would make a note of this connection with the divine, the feminine, the divine. We will touch on this again. Anyway, an author, a published poet, an author, but arguably we don't know him so much for his writings. We know him more for his speeches, right? So let's talk a little bit about the spoken words of the prime minister. So next slide. Well, whether you're a detractor or a supporter of the prime minister, you'll agree that he's an extraordinary orator, very gifted. It's the choice of words. His speeches, of course, have been studied. If you are in the audience, you'll be drawn to feel like a friend of his or a family member of his. He'll call you a brother, a sister, a father, a mother, a friend, repeatedly. So the choice of words, but also the non-verbal communication has been looked at, and it's part of this mesmerizing quality of his speeches. The cadence, the tone, and the gesticulation, the facial expression, all very, very effective, very powerful. And as somebody has commented, he has the masses eat out of his hand, which is English translation for Hindi expression. So the next slide here, please. So he does not use, by the way, he does not use the prompters or notes when he gives his charismatic speeches. He did use a teleprompter when he addressed Congress during his recent state visit. It was the second time he has addressed Congress. The first time was in 2016. Here I have a video that we're not going to play because I was hoping to play only the quick video clips. But the point here is that this was a very, very powerful speech. It went on for an hour. He had 15 standing ovations, which is remarkable in itself. What comes across here, even in English, which is his third language, right, after Gujarati and Hindi, is how well he engages with the audience and how he owns the scene. He comes across as humorous. For example, he makes a joke about the progress of AI in the past few years. But AI means artificial intelligence, but also means American-Indian connection, right? So everybody laughs, and he talks about there is power. He talks about the economic growth of India, right, and how it's going to be the third economic power by the end of the decade. And there is emotions. He uses one of his poems, and he recites it in his native language and then in English. So that's also owning the whole situation. Goes on for a minute with his own poem. So his written words, his spoken words. Now I want to talk a little bit about context, right? So India or Bharat, as some of the Hindu nationalists think of renaming the country using a very ancient word. The most populous country in the world as of this year, by an estimate. Also the largest diaspora and arguably the most successful diaspora in the world. As I said, a growing economy, the fifth by GDP now, but projected to overcome Germany and Japan by 2030. A nuclear power, of course, but also the fourth country to put a spacecraft on Moon as of this year. But in addition to all that, a cultural and civilizational giant with thousands of years of history and exquisite artistic and scientific production, birthplace of some of the biggest world religions and important philosophies. Also, place of study and writings of statecraft. The Artha Shastra of Kautilya is actually read at IWP. Some of the classes, upper classes. Over 2,000-year-old, Kautilya is one of the names of an advisor to an emperor of the Mauryan dynasty, Chandragupta. And of course, a very complex place, a mosaic of languages. There are over 20 languages officially recognized in the Constitution, and the largest pluralistic democracy in the world. And a place with which, there has been commerce for thousands of years. I have here a quote from Pliny the Elder, who in the first century lamented how much the Romans were spending on spices and gems in this commerce with India. Please, the next slide. But back to the Prime Minister and a little bit of biographical information here. So he comes from Gujarat, which is a northwestern state with a long tradition of sea trade. But he comes from Vadnagar, which is right here. It's a kind of backwater place, a town, not a big town. He was born in 1950, which is 3 years after the independence of India and the partition from India and Pakistan. It's India, so we have the caste system, and we have here in the picture the originally the four castes coming from the body parts of Brahma, and then the outcasts. Now, from these over centuries, the system has evolved into thousands, actually tens of thousands of castes that define the social hierarchy and organization. And Modi's family belongs to a lower caste, the Ganji caste. They're traditionally associated with oil press work. We would say it's a working class background. In the best of hypotheses, maybe lower middle class, but more working class, but not outcasts. So the next step. Yeah, so a humble background here. The father had a tea stall, so only a small grocer. That's the tea stall right there, bottom left, as it looks now, at the train station of Vatican. A small house for a family of 8 that, comes a family of 8, is the third of 6 children. The mother is, of course, homemaker, but also some house cleaning just to make ends meet. Next step. And as a child, Narendra himself, he helps his father at his stall when he can. So he sells tea to the travelers at the train station. It's a chaiwala, a tea vendor. Around age 8, he starts attending the meetings, the shakas of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, a national volunteer organization. The RSS is nowadays the largest non-profit, we can say, organization in the world, with an estimated membership of in the 200 million. It was founded in the 1920s, and the sociological raison d'etre of the RSS is Hindu nationalism. So it's for a child like Narendra Modi at that point is something to do, and it's an opportunity to have some civic education, to sing some patriotic songs, and to do some physical activity, a little bit like a Boy Scout thing at that point. He's an average student, he's athletic, he's curious, he has an inventive quality. He will become passionate about debate and theater. And in his early teens, and this is the time when China goes to war with India, actually defeats India, so there is humiliation, national humiliation, and a reaction, a patriotic reaction. And the Sainik schools are sort of the military-style academies that are founded at this time as part of this reaction. And Modi hears about this at the train station when he meets people and he wants to become a student. He would have to leave town and be on board at one of these schools. The father does not allow it. The father wants him to stay with the family and kind of follow in the footsteps. And this is where he and his father starts not seeing eye to eye. Narendra doesn't know what he wants to do, but he doesn't want to follow in the footsteps. And so he continues, with the RSS, and he finds there a sort of a replacement father figure, a parallel father who will be his mentor for many years, and who goes by the AKA of Vakil Sahib. He's an attorney by training and a prominent local member of the RSS. The next slide, please. So these are his teenage years. It's a time of spiritual awakening, intellectual awakening. While he's in high school, he becomes an avid reader, and he becomes a follower of the Swami Vivekananda, a monk, Hindu monk and philosopher, who lived in the second half of the 19th century, actually 20th century. So another thing where he doesn't see eye to eye with his family, which is very important, is the arranged marriage. According to the culture, there has been an arranged marriage when Narendra was a child, and Jashoda, the girl, was also, somewhere between 3 and 6. Now, this arranged marriage becomes legal as they are teenagers, and when it's time to start the cohabitation, so create a family, that's where actually Narendra Modi decides that he wants to leave. He doesn't want to have a family stay in that town and follow in the footsteps of his family. And so he leaves, and he essentially renounces. He becomes an ascetic, a Hindu mendicant. This is also something that part of, has to be seen within the Indian culture, right? And he goes on a 2-year by foot pilgrimage, following in the footsteps of Swami Vivekananda. He goes to the Himalayas and crisscrosses India, and actually tries to become a monk. That's his plan at this point. But 3 times in 3 of the monasteries founded by Vivekananda, he's turned away. Why? They don't see in him, spiritual life in his future. They see something different, right? So 2 years like this. And then, next slide, then he decides to come back home, but briefly. Briefly because now his mind is set on becoming a full-fledged member of the RSS and sort of a propagandist, a pracharak and worker of the RSS. Not easy. He goes to live in the town where the RSS has the regional headquarters. If you're Modi at that point, you wake up at 4:30 in the morning and you go to the headquarters, you start doing chores and all kinds of things, and you have a long work day. And then when you're done with that, because you don't have a place to stay, you're staying with a distant relative who runs a canteen. And so then you work at the canteen. And one day, the patrons, when the customers are gone, you clean up and you sleep on a table. That's what he did for 2 years. Then get up at 4:30 again, clean up, and restart the day like that. So not exactly easy novitiate. That's what he has to do. That's what he does. And here, the second picture is his mentor, and then he finally becomes a full-fledged mentor. No, strong worker, very reliable, intelligent. They make him study, go through college and post-grad as a distance learner. And when Indira Gandhi starts the emergency, declares the emergency, de facto suspending democracy in 1975, between 1975 and 1977, she outlaws the RSS. So everything goes underground. And this is an opportunity really for young Modi to shine. As an underground RSS member, he is a student, so he can go to Delhi, back and forth from Delhi and Gujarat, and he keeps in communication with leaders of the organization. He uses aliases, he uses disguises. For example, here the bottom picture as a Sikh. He has a gift for organizing, he has a gift for putting together propaganda material and disseminating. He begins to understand the importance of influencing foreign opinion. And at the end of the emergency, he will be tasked by the RSS with writing the official account of the emergency for the organization. And in the meantime, of course, he rises through the ranks. But even as he rises through the ranks, his lifestyle remains Spartan. He doesn't own anything. He's always on the move. He's always a guest of somebody. He's always eating what is offered. Always vegetarian. So the next step. And so all these talents and all this work will lead him to be detailed by the RSS to the BJP. The BJP is, Bharatiya Janata Party, is essentially an offspring of the RSS. It is part of the family of the RSS, the Sangh Parivar. Number of organizations born out of the RSS, and all under the Hindutva, this Indo-nationalist ideology. And so, in 1987, he becomes a political operator. Around this time, he loses his mentor, the RSS mentor, and his father. And his mentor in the BJP is Advani, one of the leaders of the party. And then he's a strong organizer, he's a strategist, and he becomes a specialist of these yatras, that are essentially political campaigns, chariot festival, going around from village to village. He becomes the main organizer for the BJP. And with that comes, some exposure, public exposure, becomes known to the media. He becomes an important person in the party. And with that territory comes some political infighting and jealousy in the 90s. And one thing that Modi knows how to do is also take a step out, take a step aside when it's better to do that. Because then they call him back. Because at the end of the day, he's good at what he does, he's excellent. And so when things are difficult and are messy, Modi is called back. So that's. Can I have the next slide? Well, Vivekananda has been his spiritual and philosophical guidance, and Modi finds in this author, Upadhyay, the political, economic inspiration. And that's because his integral humanist is the basic philosophy of the BJP. It's endorsed by the BJP in the 1980s as basic philosophy. Well, it's an indigenous development model that becomes sort of a departure in India from the state-centric approach to economic policy of the Congress Party. The leaders of the Congress Party were educated at London School of Economics and Cambridge University, and they had this Fabian socialist approach that went on for decades in India. This is a departure, it's a pro-market turn, and that's what Modi will practice when he becomes a leader. And the next step is just that, and that's 2001. He's tapped to be the chief minister of Gujarat. This is after the earthquake in Gujarat. So nothing comes easy for this man, and they send him there because things are very difficult. And they're about to become worse because months later, 2002, you may remember the Godhra massacres. A train with Hindu pilgrims was assaulted and torched by Muslim rioters. Tens of people died. And then what followed was weeks of communal violence, which is a recurrent problem, right? And over 1,000 casualties, total, mostly Muslims, because it was the revenge of the Hindus. So Modi is accused of having not done enough in the best case scenario, or having actually, help the Hindu mobs to kill Muslims. And this becomes a very serious thing. In fact, he will not be allowed, his visa to come to the US is revoked, and can go to the European Union either. And to these days, the detractors of Modi will think that he was at least partly responsible, even though he has been exonerated by the Indian Supreme Court. But anyway, he actually offers his resignation to this party. That is rejected, and so he runs for election, and he wins, and then he's re-elected twice as chief minister. And these are years in which he becomes sort of the development man. He realizes this Gujarat model of governance innovation. And on that track record, he will run in 2014 for prime minister, wins, and is re-elected in 2019, and is running again next year. And at this point, he has become sort of a global statement, a global phenomenon, a Vishwa guru, a global teacher, right? With a lot of fans around the world, including self-professed here Elon Musk. So who is Prime Minister Modi? Well, he has a multi-layered persona. He has his humble origins, a chaiwala, a tea vendor. He becomes an ascetic, spiritual seeker, a sannyasi, and lives 2 years like that as a pilgrim. Certainly molded by the RSS since early on, becomes a propagandist, a full-fledged member of the RSS. And then from there, a political operator, a leader, and a statesman. He's sort of he's always an outsider. Even in the RSS, dominated by the Brahmins, he comes from a lower caste. So always an outsider, but he's somebody who always does very well, is very focused on what he's doing, and learns where all the cogs and the levers are. And so from outsider becomes perfectly insider. He has this gift for communication and propaganda. He is visionary, but also looking backwards. His culture is traditional, is the Hindu culture, but he himself in his own life has broken from tradition and has pursued his own path against what his family wanted. There is a calm and collected quality about him. People describe it as detached. He's meditating. He does yoga every day, early in the morning. Wake up and does yoga and meditation for an hour. And yet he has this raucous and gregarious persona. He is a shrewd politician who certainly doesn't shy away from attacking his opponents if he has to. He has this missionary zeal, but he's also very pragmatic. He is very attentive to detail, very meticulous in all he does, and yet is driven by strong emotions that he has to express, in his poetry, as we have seen, right? His marriage, for all is known, has not been consummated, has never had, intimate relations, for all is known, yet he projects this very masculine persona, sort of in a symbolic, union with the feminine India, the feminine mystique, the feminine divine is married to India, is married to the Ganges River, which is also feminine. So a lot of layers here, and he's polarizing with all these layers. So there is there seems to be a good Modi, or at least there are people who see him as really only good. In what way? Well, his narrative really intersects with the aspirational, young, growing India, right? Meritocracy over dynastic privilege and then sclerosis, right? So that's the thing, right? And in that way, it connects with youth, it connects with the diaspora. He's a modernizer, but not a westernizer. He maintains the strategic autonomy of India. So yes, it's obviously a counterweight, civilizational, everything, counterweight to China in the Indo-Pacific, but he's also, giving hand here to Putin, and he presents himself as the voice of the global South, and so that sort of, the people who like him will see all this as good, right? But then the next slide. But then there seems to be a bad Modi, at least people who really don't like him, and there are detractors, and what they see is an autocrat, who is fostering a personality cult, who's controlling the narrative, who's putting really the very democratic institutions of India in danger. And also they see a mesmerizer, they see a mirage maker who is, really creating the story of an India that is growing and changing, when in reality this change is not really happening, and the problems of India are pretty much the same, long-standing problems are the same, right? So sort of a bad model here. Huh? So, next slide. So what about his family? What about his legally married wife? Well, as he says in this quote, he has to think of the entire country and has taken the decision to stay away from his family. That's not unlike other Indian leaders. It kind of goes with, again, we have to put things in cultural context, right? But he has taken it to an extreme. He hasn't really spoken to his, wife in decades. It seems like they last spoke when they were teenagers. And actually did not acknowledge to be married until 2014, when he ran for prime minister and had to fill out some forms, and he checked that he was married. And so the press went to find Jashovadan, and she was actually happy to give some interviews until she got a security detail, which keeps her safe but also keeps away the press from her, right? And what she said is, she's a retired teacher, lives a modest life, religious person. She's never even thought of remarrying, and she has followed her husband from afar, praying for him, fasting for him, and as she said to the press, waiting for him to give her a call. That call never comes, right? Also, his family of origin, he has definitely not been close. He has spoken to usually the older of the 6 siblings, as sort of a ritualistic connection with his family of origin, with, I'd say, one exception. And let's look at the next slide. And that's his mother. And the mother who passed away last year at age 100. The connection is, yes, ritualized, but also profound. I had another video here, which I think is very interesting. I don't think we can see it, it's a town hall meeting held by Facebook, and so Mark Zuckerberg interviewed the Prime Minister. This is a few years ago, when the mother was still alive. And so Zuckerberg starts out saying that at some point, early on, when he was developing his company, Facebook, he didn't know where to go with it, didn't know what to do. And somebody told him, well, go to India and meditate and find a way. And so he did just that for months, went to temples. Well, that's a great way to start a conversation with the Prime Minister at home, right? Really, you see how he reacts to that. Then Zuckerberg says, Prime Minister, you and I have one thing in common. We really care about family, right? And here are my parents, by the way. I want to introduce them to you. And so that's another strong emotional reaction from the Prime Minister. And then he asks him, well, tell us about your mother. And, wish you could see this, how he talks about his mother, how he talks about the sacrifices that she made, the poverty that they experienced. And he's really genuinely moved. He is on the verge of sobbing and crying for a minute or two. And then he kind of regains composure and says, and that's just one of a million Indian mothers or more like this, or 100 million. And so I thought this was very, poignant, significant, and a great way to talk to him and to have him access these deep emotions that, I started out with, with his poetry today. So this is the end of the profile of Modi. I want to, if I have a minute here, I want to say a couple of things here. Leadership analysis is, one can say, has been part of the mission of the U.S. intelligence since early on, since the time of the Office of Strategic Services, when two teams led by psychologists, psychoanalysts were tasked with profiling Adolf Hitler. Their work is actually published, is available online. This work continued, in the CIA. And I have here on the top right, Gerald Post, who led a multidisciplinary team at the agency profiling foreign leaders. One of the high points was the work that they did in the preparation of preparing the Carter administration for the Camp David, the work at Camp David that led to the peace between Egypt and Israel. Now that's a psychobiographical method, which is a qualitative method rooted in a sort of psychoanalytic work. But there is there are quantitative methods that are essentially text analysis of speeches and interviews that are computer-based, and for example, the leadership trait analysis of Margaret Herman. One last slide here, and that's kind of my plot. The last one. Yeah, so I think of this as a tool, one of the many tools of statecraft, of the in the range of diplomacy. And I see this in the context of the concept of strategic empathy. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy does not mean walking, with agreeing with the other. And what it is understanding or trying to understand the other person. The intentions, the needs, the emotions. And so we have to know ourselves and we have to know the other to serve our national interest. And that's better than being self-absorbed, because that leads to hubris. Right? And so one last thought about Prime Minister Modi. I think what I have presented is an individual who is constantly in motion and has a restless quality about himself, and who has all these layers and polarities within itself. My thought is that precisely that constant motion, the fact that he never takes leave, he never goes to the equivalent or Delaware or Florida, right, to rest. He has never taken a day off as far as we know, right? But that's a necessity for him to keep all these polarities and all these layers together. So you might be interested if he decided at some point to rest for a while to see what happens with all these balls that he's been keeping up in the air for decades. Thank you.